this police department is similar. It's similar to what has happened in other departments across the country, and everyone's less safe in Minneapolis as a result of all of this. And so that was sort of my point in trying to go as close to all of this as possible, and gain the trust of those people to allow me to tell their stories. And in the book, I profile a few of these officers who are in the 3rd precinct the night that it's surrendered to the mob, because this is all part of the plan. And I don't think a lot of people knew that in watching the news coverage. The thought was that they would give up the precinct and then this rioting would stop that had dragged on for several days at this point in Minneapolis. As ridiculous as that sounds, and that of course did not happen. Instead, the 3rd precinct, if you watch The Fall of Minneapolis, you see it basically looks the same to this day, just this burnt out shell of a building that's now barricaded, and this blight and eyesore in the community 4 years later, and something that's never happened in U.S. history before. But again, it seemed that no reporters even cared about what took place there.
A precinct, it was like a 1970s movie I remember seeing as a little kid, where like a mob attacks a police station. The police in the movie, the police were the good guys, but basically a mob was basically what happened in Minneapolis. Is a mob was basically told, hey, you can have this precinct. And of course the bizarre details, leaving the gates open in the front for the mob to come in and locking the gates in the back so the cops can't get out. Some crazy details that you uncover. The buses that were there, that were supposed to be there to evacuate the police, not there. So the police are running on foot. Crazy. Are you proud of, are you like, is any part of you like, yeah, like, do you get to enjoy? I've made 10 documentaries, 5 are all-time 5 in the top 100 best on iTunes, but mine aren't of anything of social importance. They're just like fun documentaries. Is any, and so I got to celebrate it, like, yeah, I'm a badass filmmaker, I kicked ass. Does any part of you get to be like, celebrate the success of your film?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. We've had, I think it's more than 8 million people or 8 million views on the documentary. And that was really part of this too. We wanted to give it out for free, believing the truth should be free. And we also knew that, putting up a paywall or something would prevent people from watching it. I think what has meant the most to me personally have been the emails and the comments that say, gosh, I just wish that we had this information from the beginning. And these are all sides of the aisle. For some reason, this all turned into a political disaster, like so many things seem to be nowadays. But when people really do have the facts, they can make, decisions for themselves. So why is the media, manipulating this message? Why is our government withholding information from us? And those were the themes I really wanted to bring out in all of this, because I would really see that so often on so many stories. So that's what's meant the most through all of this for me, to be able to change minds. A lot of people won't admit that, though. However, we live in a world now where you can never admit you're wrong. It seems. But there's also no real celebration, because, here we still have 4 cops. They're in prison. A police department is, it will never recover. And if they do, it will be decades from now. And, what really still keeps me up at night are all these victims left in the wake. And those are victims of carjackings now. Those are victims who've left the state of Minnesota. Again, I've talked about this, but this domino effect, this ripple effect is unbelievable. But I also hope that leaving this there, and I know this about journalism and news stories, it's kind of the first draft of our history. I hope someday someone will look back and say, you know what, we're not going to do this. We're not going to, let's read this as a manual of what not to do. And actually show some leadership, because that's really what this is also, is poor leadership that I wanted to highlight in Minneapolis and in the state of Minnesota.
I have a lot of friends who are police officers. Being in the CrossFit scene, it's a lifestyle practice that a lot of first responders use to basically stay in tip-top shape, right? Eat right, move right, and be in the highest physical condition that your DNA can be in, so that you're safe on the job and people are safe around you. So I have a lot of friends who are cops. right away after the George Floyd incident, I started hearing things like, yeah, we had a call, and there was a black woman there with a box cutter waving around, and we all just drove away. I saw a guy doing 90 down the road. I pulled up next to him to pull him over. He's a black guy. I just drove by. My opinion is that the people really don't have a lot of people don't really understand that George Floyd was the moment. Some people want to blame the pandemic. Some people want to blame COVID. But we know the statistic. It's like 6% of the U.S. population does 51% of the murders, and those are black men. And obviously we know color is a correlate. It's not a cause. And they're killing their own. It's like 96% of the people they kill are other people with melanated skin. I suspect the way the George Floyd thing unfolded has basically led to just the lawless society that's going on in all of these big cities. I mean, we've even heard the bizarre phenomenon. We had that incident in New York you may be familiar with where there was video of it. A black man killed a guy sitting on a bus stop with his girlfriend, and his girlfriend doesn't want to identify the murderer because she thinks it would be racist. Mm-hmm. I mean, the impact of George Floyd is like beyond. It's exacerbated racism. And ironically, the people who are the most racist, they stand out because they're the ones who are like, their support of George Floyd is what's getting all of these melanated people killed now, because the police aren't going into their neighborhoods to want to enforce the laws. Do you have that sense too? I mean, I think it's like pivotal. Like, I think it's like, hey, we're living this right now. This is it. Do you have that sense?
Absolutely, Sevan. So in Minneapolis alone, they recorded the 3 highest years of homicides since ever in history. So this is historic levels, and the majority of those killed were blacks, and those are the facts. But yet this is ground zero for Black Lives Matter. I mean, I think the number was nearly $90 million raised on the back of George Floyd. Through Black Lives Matter. However, corporate media has remained silent on where any of that money went. Well, turns out it didn't go to help Black lives. It's amazing to me that you still have the Black Lives Matter signs out in front of the lakes in Minneapolis, some of the more wealthy, affluent neighborhoods. You certainly don't see any in North Minneapolis and such, where they're begging for the cops to come back. And they never wanted them to go anywhere in the first place, but nobody elevated their voices through all of this. And that's the sad reality in a way, that Black lives have never mattered less, especially in Minneapolis. But it seems that nobody wants to tell that story. You have Alex King, who's in the fall of Minneapolis. Now, keep in mind, Alex King is on the job for just a couple of days. He's the black officer who arrests George Floyd, that it seemed no one knew was even there. And we wanted to go ahead and include his story in the documentary. Here's this, African-American kid, grew up with dreams of being a cop in Minneapolis. His mom's a longtime educator there. She adopted several children, just the great family in Minneapolis. And he's thrown in prison his second day on the job over all of this rookie officer. But nobody seemed to care about Alex. And he talks about that. He said, I don't know why I was never included in any of this, but he said, my skin color didn't fit the narrative, so it was ignored. I mean, he also knew, and that's the thing. If you care about George Floyd through all of this, you really have to look at how he was used. He sort of became a pawn. If you've ever seen the Greatest Lie Ever Sold, it was a documentary the Daily Wire produced when Candace Owens was still there. She delves into a lot of this with Black Lives Matter, and goes back to George Floyd's apartment, which isn't even in Minneapolis. Keep in mind, he lived in a suburb in St. Louis Park. And she goes back there and says that she's, interacting with his roommates, and the roommates say that George Floyd's family never even came to retrieve his personal belongings. His car is still there. All of his clothes are still there. It's really quite sad.
eBay. Someone can make a fortune. I bet you that there's money for that.